everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm sorry that I have had a little bit of break of making new videos, but I have had my master's thesis that I need to finish during this springtime, and I have still quite a lot of things to do with it, and that will always come first because I really need to graduate. But as Oscars are approaching, I really wanted to make a video about all of the costume design nominations on the Academy Awards this year. And I have obviously watched them all. I have a goal to watch as many Academy Award nominated films this year as I can, as I did last year as well. This year is a little bit easier because most of them are in online because of the coronavirus. But in this video, I'm gonna talk about all of the costume design nominations films of the costumes, not the actual films. And in the end of this video, I'm gonna rank all of them from my least favorite to my favorite, and also I'm gonna tell you what films should have been nominated, in my opinion, besides these films, or instead of some of these films. And also I'm going to tell you what I think which film is going to win and why. But the costume design nominated films this year, they are Emma, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Monk, Mulan, and Pinocchio. First, I really want to talk about what makes an award-winning costume design in a film and what deserves the Academy Award. Most of these films are either fantasy or period dramas, and usually nominated films are fit into one of these categories, or they are sci-fi or something like that. Something that has elaborate costumes. As usually there are fantasy films nominated, so we cannot think of the accuracy because that you have to have the same standard for all of the films, and if some of the films are fantasy films, they are not held accountable in the same way in a costume design as period dramas are. So we cannot think that the accuracy is the only defining point, what makes a good costume design. Also, we cannot think that the most aesthetically pleasing film will win the costume design award, because that isn't fair either, because everyone has a different kind of aesthetic that pleases them, and that is very highly opinion based thing, so we cannot really think critically with that one. I personally think that the costume plot is something that is worth of Academy Award nomination and a win. If you have watched my other videos, you probably have heard me talking about the costume plot. Costume plot really means that the film uses costumes as a part of telling the story. Like the costumes can be written in a part of story, like the red shoes in Wizard of Oz, or costume plot can be seen as non-verbal part of the film. Costumes are used usually in character building, and I think that is the most defining point. Like, if you can really read more things about the character through their costumes, that is when you have succeeded in your costume design. And we do usually judge people based on what they wear, so we do the same thing when we watch films. We see the character and we see what they wear, and we judge the character based on what they wear, and we learn more things about the character based on what she wears or he wears. So in this video, when I go through each of the nominated film, I will also mention about things about accuracy, but that is not going to be the main focus of this video, so don't go in expecting that. Let's start with Pinocchio. I'm going to talk about the films in reverse alphabetical order, so Pinocchio's first. Pinocchio is Italian film based on the 1883 book The Adventures of Pinocchio. So this is not a remake of Disney's Pinocchio, and this is not made by Disney, this is Italian film. So don't watch it if you expect anything like Disney's Pinocchio, because this is not it. and there's nothing similar to the Disney's version. The movie isn't set in any specific time period or era, at least based on the clothing. It can be almost anything, really. The film has a lot of magical elements to it, and it doesn't really try to portray any certain era. The most of the characters are quite poor, so they don't have more than like 1 or 2 costumes per character, so we don't really see any character development through the costumes. The Pinocchio's costume is really quite accurate to the book illustrations, the original book's illustrations. And I think that's a really cute thing. I think it looks cute. Also, some of the other characters are quite similar to their book counterparts. I haven't actually read the book, so I don't know how accurate the film actually is to the books. But based on some of the pictures that I saw, some of the characters really do look like their book counterparts. But the fairy isn't one of them, and I actually like that it isn't, because this fairy in the movie, I really love her costumes, or her one costume that is shown when she's a child and when she's adult. I want to talk a bit about the fairy's costume, because it has layers of historical elements to it. As you know, as I said, the movie is based on the 1883 book, and the fairy's costume, it has very 1850s vibes or 1840s vibes, like pleating in the front of the costume. It's really similar what they did in the 1840s, and it's really beautiful. Like, the costume looks really old and a bit ragged, and it's a bit weird that it's old and ragged, because they are the ones that seem to have at least some amount of money, and they live in a luxury. So it looks a bit weird when she is older and it's a bit like ragged, but I really love the historical details that are in the front of the bodies, because I think that's really beautiful. And I really love when movies take inspiration from historical dresses, even though when the movies are completely fantasy. One of the examples of similar thing is Cinderella, Disney's remake of Cinderella. I love that takes bits of fashion history and puts them in this fantastical context. And I actually love that type of thing to do in the fantasy films. And as it is a fantasy film, it doesn't matter if it's accurate or not. It is what it is. It's pretty in their own way. And that's what I like in fantasy costume. Like, you take something and you make it as a new, and you make it the fit part of the world that you're building with the costumes. So the next one that we're going to talk about is Mulan. This one was really the hardest one to me to think about and look about, because my studies have been focusing on Western fashion, so I actually I have my knowledge on Chinese fashion history is very small, and it's not really as big as I would want to. So the accuracy point is really hard for me to even talk about regarding this film. However, there are wonderful videos about historical accuracy of this film, not just the costumes, but the whole historical accuracy. So I will link down below at least one of them, so you can go check that one out and see what you think. However, I really did think that the costumes in Mulan were beautiful in this film. Mulan clearly had her own color palette, which in this film was red. The same color was seen a lot in Disney's original Mulan film, which this one is based on, obviously. The color red does have a big significance in Chinese culture, and it represents a luck, joy, and it is associated with fire, which in this context, if you have seen the film, you know there's the phoenix bird, so it does fit into the context in this film. Also, in modern China, color red is associated and used by the Chinese government, which actually makes sense because Mulan has a red armor in this film and she's projecting to the government or the emperor. So in that way, she's protecting the country's colors red. It really makes sense. Mulan has a lot of fantastical elements, but it is still supposed to be set in 4th to the 6th century, according to the Hua Mulan legend. So we actually do have a set time frame in here, so we could look at the accuracy of the costumes. But as this movie does have a lot of fantastical elements, it's kind of irrelevant. And please go and correct me in the comments down below if I got anything wrong about this one or the other ones. Because I'm still learning in a way. And as I said, I'm not expert on Chinese fashion and what all of it represents. Let's talk about Mank. Mank is set in the 1930s and 1940s Hollywood, and is focusing on the backstory of the writer of Citizen Kane, Herman Mankiewicz. Mank features a lot of people that has actually lived, and it's not that long time ago when those people have been alive, so it can be held accountable by historical accuracy better than the other films, or any of the other nominated films. Also, costumes from the recent history are easier to replicate, because as the costumes you can actually use vintage pieces, and there's a lot more like advertising and photographs and surviving objects, surviving dresses, surviving piece of clothing that you can look at and see what was actually worn at this time and what wasn't. So this film is completely in black and white. As we know, Academy Awards love this kind of stuff. And there isn't actually a like the timeline of the film. It's really jumping back and forth to the 40s and the 30s, which makes it kind of harder to look at the costumes of the film and how they are developed. And I didn't really notice any particular costume plots in this film because the main character is a man, and the costume plot theory applies to specifically in women's costumes. That is what Jane Gaines wrote when she wrote about the costume plot. So the costume plot is developed for the women's costumes and for their story and supporting of their story. When looking at men's costumes, it can be a little bit different. And we don't have a female main character. We have several side characters, but we don't see them in both of the timelines. We see them in either in the 30s or either in the 40s. So we don't see them like going through the whole thing. Some of my favorite costumes in this film were worn by Amanda Seyfried, and she was playing Marion Davies, who was a real actress, and some of her costumes were actually copies or just inspired by Marion Davies' costumes that she wore just in her real life or in the films that she was in. So that one, I think they got that part done quite well. Also, I'm Seyfried, who doesn't love her? Let's talk about Ma Rainey's Black Pudding. Ma Rainey's Black Pudding was based on a play about an afternoon of Ma Rainey's recording studio, and Ma Rainey was a real recording blues artist from the 1920s. Again, we have a film made about real people. So we have pictures, we have recordings, we have possible surviving items of clothing from these people, and it's quite recent history. It's about 100 years ago, so we actually have material about what they wore. This film is set in one afternoon, so we don't really have costume changes. Like, the main part of the film is just the one afternoon. So as there isn't a lot of costume changes, there isn't much of a costume plot. We can see certain things about certain characters through their clothing, mainly about the side characters. Also, I think the historical accuracy of these costumes in this film is pretty good. At least the women's ones. I really like those. Also, the hair and makeup. I think I love the hair and the makeup in this film more than the costumes. Like that is something that is actually on point and it looks good. Like the costumes are on point as well. But I think the hair and makeup are more in the shining role than the costumes. To me, this one is looking a bit more historically accurate than Mank. And personally, I didn't get much anything new about the characters, just based on their costumes. The costumes are quite plain, as they are 1920s day clothing, and it is a hot summer day, and they are not wearing much. Like, there isn't layers and layers of clothing. Yeah. There isn't really much to say about the costumes in this film. They look good. Finally, let's talk about Emma. And no, I have not made this outfit for this video. I just love Regency. Yeah. So, Emma is an adaptation of Jane Austen's novel called Emma. I'm a bit biased here, but Emma is actually my favorite novel. So, movie made of my favorite novel. It's gonna get critiqued, but I really love this version. Costumes were on point. Yeah. I even could make a separate video about the costumes of Emma. I have so much to say. There's so much amazing things. But the video would be a bit boring because it would be just me praising the costumes. So I'm not gonna make one, obviously. You can go and look at my Instagram. There's tons of posts comparing the fashion plates and the costumes. So first of all, 10 out of 10 of the accuracy. As you have seen on my Instagram, Emma has, Alexander Byrne, the costume designer, has taken a lot of inspiration for the costumes from V&A's collection of fashion plates. And also collection of dresses that V&A has of Regency era. Some of the dresses that we see in the movie are actually replicas of the V&A's collection dresses. So those ones is just like, obviously that's going to be accurate if it's a copy, if it's a replica of a real object from the era. So the film is sectioned into 4 parts, which are the seasons of the year. And each of the section of the film is, each season has its own color palette. And the winter is, we have a lot of more darker colors during the winter, and during the summer we have a lot of whites. Emma and Harriet wearing a lot of whites. And the whites are the thing that we usually associate Regency with, and it is amazing to see the other colors as well, and we can see how Regency women dressed in different seasons of the year, because we usually just see the white ones, and we usually see just the summer. Also, one of the things I really like in this film is that we can see the wealth difference between Emma and Harriet in the beginning of the film through their dress. As we can see, Emma is dressed in elaborate gowns, and there's a lot of layers to her costumes, and Harriet is wearing much more plain clothing in the beginning. But as their friendship starts to more progress, we can see that Emma is starting to lend Harriet more clothing, and Harriet is starting to dress more expensively, and we can see Harriet dressing in those layers as well. As when you wear more layers, it requires more fabric, obviously, and thin fabrics are something that poor people really can't afford because it can tear really easily, so they won't really buy those ones because once it tears, it's ruined, and fabric is really expensive in this era, so you wouldn't want to do that if you don't have a lot of money. And also that layering requires a lot of fabric, and fabric is expensive, so it makes sense. Also, I really loved Mrs. Elton's dresses. One of them is orange, and it's kind of like her clothing is a little bit more like tacky in a way, and orange is something that we don't really see as flattering color in the Regency era, and in a lot of other Jane Austen adaptations we have like the villain women, and they wear orange, and in Jane Austen world orange is the color for villains, and I love it because it's just a thing that we see in the film world that is regarding Jane Austen and Regency era. I could just talk the whole day about costumes in Emma and show you side-by-side comparisons, but I'm gonna end this one in here. Otherwise we're gonna be here all day. I would be just rambling about how I love Regency. Now that we have gone through all of the nominated films, I shortly want to mention some films that I think should have been nominated or could have been nominated for the best costume design as well, that came out in the time limit that came out last year, basically in the time limit that the film should be come out of. So first, I think Birds of Prey should have been nominated for the best costume design. There are tons of amazing videos analyzing the costume in this film, and I will link some of them down below. And honestly, I think that film, it's like the costume design is really on point, and it really tells more about the characters. Also, I think Enola Holmes could have been nominated for the costume design. The costumes aren't the most accurate thing, but that doesn't really count in Oscars. It is a period drama, so that is one thing why I think it could have been nominated. I'm not really surprised that it isn't, but it could have been. Also, one of the films that I think should have been nominated for the best costume design is Jingle Jangle. If you haven't seen it, it's a Christmas musical, and the costumes in it, they have so many layers of meaning, and they still have a historical silhouette, and it's not supposed to be accurate, and it's amazing, like the costume design in that film. I have made a couple of posts about the film on my Instagram, so go check that one out from my Instagram. And I really think that one and Birds of Prey should have also been nominated, because those one, they really use the costumes in the film in an amazing creative way and tell more about the characters and build up the world. And here is my personal rating of the films that I have talked about. It doesn't mean that I don't like the film or I like the film, depending on what place it is. This is just purely about the costumes, and it doesn't mean that I don't like the costumes. It's just, I just have to rank them in a one way. There has to be one winner and one has to be in the bottom, so it doesn't mean that I doesn't like it. In the fifth place, I put Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. I actually like the film and the costumes, but there just isn't that many costumes in the film, so I think there could have been some other films nominated in place of that one, because there isn't that many costumes really, and yeah. In the fourth place, I put Mank. This film wasn't my favorite, but I did like the costumes, like the ones that Amanda Seyfried wore. They are really beautiful, but again, there is not that many female costumes, and there isn't much to say about the costumes. In the third place, I put Mulan. This film could have been better. Costumes were really nice. I cannot really say if they were accurate or not that much. I think the costumes were quite fun, and I did enjoy them, but overall I don't think it should win. In the second place, I put Pinocchio. Again, this is not my favorite film, but you can really see the amount of work that has gone into these costumes and planning out the costumes. And I think like some of the like the fairy costume, that one is amazing. And there's some really good ones in there. And you can see the amount of work that has gone through those. And in the first place, I put Emma. You're probably not surprised if you follow me on Instagram, because I really love this film and these costumes. I really love these costumes. It's just like the costume plot and everything. I'm just like in love. Love it. Also, this year I actually believe that Emma is going to also win the award. I will be very surprised if it's not. And obviously I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible when thinking of this. And I think Emma or Pinocchio is probably going to win the award. And I hope Emma wins, because Alexander Byrne has really deserved this award, I think. And yeah, so this is the video. And I want you to comment your favorite costume film of this list, of the nominated. And I also want you to give your prediction in the comments as well. So tell me your favorite and your prediction. Also, if you think there are films that came out last year that should have been nominated for the best costume, put them down below as well. I really want to know your opinions, and I think it would be really fun to have a discussion on that one. What films should have been nominated on this category this year but weren't. So thank you for watching, and I really hope you like this video, and please subscribe if you want to see more, and maybe follow me on Instagram as well. And I'm just happy you watched, and see you in the next one. Bye!